Hi, everybody. ABC 10 meteorologist Brenden Mincheff here with a check of the drought monitor. It only changed fractions of a percent, but also the bigger story that we're going to focus on this week are the increasing number of fire weather days that we are having in California. And that's thanks to climate change. And that's introducing a whole host of new things such as windier and drier conditions and just making the whole firefighting effort more difficult. And we'll get to that in a second. But first, check of the drought monitor map. Again, it's going to look the same as last week. It was just fractions of a percent that changed. So most of the state still in no drought whatsoever. Abnormally dry about the other 1/4% of the state there. And then just moderate drought, less than 5% of the state, mostly down in the deserts of Southern California. So let's talk about the PRECIP tracker. Obviously, it's a new month. We're not going to see really much to talk about for June, but for the year as a whole, 18.86 inches in downtown Sacramento. That is about 7 inches above the normal to this point in the water year. Now, these water numbers are going to be very important for what we're going to talk about in a minute, and that is the fire outlook for the next 4 months. So as we look at these numbers, these total PRECIP numbers, and then also the departure from normal, which is mostly positive across the entirety of the state, this is super important for the topic today. So keep these numbers in mind as we move forward. The other thing that we'll mention too is the snowpack. Still in the Southern Sierra, more than an average year's worth of snow is still sitting up there in the Southern Sierra waiting to melt off. In the Central Sierra, it's a little less than 100%, but 94%. And then up in the Northern Sierra, it's at 60%. But notice the average to date numbers in the 200 to 400% range, because there's still quite a lot of snow up there for this point in the year compared to what we normally see. For the state as a whole, it is 86% of that April 1st average. So we're obviously melting that snow, and it makes sense. We've been so warm, right? We're melting that snow down, but there's still some more to go. That's why rivers are still fast, still cold, and still not really safe to be in and around. So keep that in mind, please, especially this weekend, as we have been in the 90s and we will be today as well. Next week, this week coming up here, we're going to be in the 80s across Northern California. So actually a little bit below average for this time of year. But the first 3 days in June, a little bit of everything. It's been a warming trend. 83 and below average to start the month, 89 and above average for Friday, and then 93 is what we made it to on June 3rd in downtown Sacramento. I do expect for June 4th, that will be somewhere near 95 degrees across much of Northern California. Still have not had our first 100-degree day yet, though, which obviously is some good news. The earliest that's ever happened over the last 30 years has been May 4th. That was in 1990. But the average first 100-degree day in Sacramento is actually the day that I'm recording this video, June 4th. So 'tis the season for triple-digit temps. They are going to be coming at some point. In fact, there's maybe some potential about a couple weeks from now, but honestly, we'll just have to keep an eye on the forecast. But, you know, it's going to happen, right? Like, triple digits always eventually come around, and we will experience them. So let's at least just be thankful that honestly we have not been all that hot for all that long yet this summer. Now, talking about fire weather days, this is the focus of this video. This is a map from Climate Central. They just released a new analysis of the increasing number of fire weather days. Those are days that are hot, dry, and windy and really lead to the potential for these explosive fire growth days. And so taking a look at the annual number of fire weather days, this is just kind of how many there normally are. You can see in parts of southern Colorado and New Mexico, West Texas, including the Panhandle of Texas, down into Southern California and Arizona as well. Those days are typically about 30 to 50 days or more. In the Northern California region, it's a little less than that. But now we're going to flip the map here, and we're going to take a look at how many days we've been adding to that. So now the darker colors are suggesting how many additional days, right? So that was, the previous map was the total number. This is how many we're adding to that number over the last 50 years. And you can see we're adding about 2 weeks across much of the Central Valley of California, but parts of far west Texas, parts of New Mexico, and parts of Arizona too, and Colorado are all adding a significantly higher number of days to that list. Taking a look at Sacramento specifically, this is the Sacramento River drainage, the Sacramento watershed. Look at this number here, 14 additional fire weather days per year since about 50 years ago. And you can see that trend line here just kind of keeps growing, right? That's the number of days we've added over the last 50 years. And as the world continues to warm and we experience drier conditions, longer droughts, more severe droughts, but also wetter winters, right? With that, like what we've had this year, where we have all that new growth, this number will only continue really to go up, unfortunately. This year, we've already had some smaller grass fires. This one, the Sickard fire in Yuba County. This was on May 30th. This is what it looked like from the Alert California camera there. Lots of smoke there. Only got to about 13 acres. But there were some evacuations with this fire. And again, this is just a reminder that really year-round is fire season in California, but certainly as we're kind of turning off the tap, right? We're not looking at any rain anymore, and at least not any substantial rain across Northern California. We are drying out. So taking a look at the 100-hour fuel moisture charts, these are just updated from June 3rd. You can see Sacramento Valley starting to come back down towards average. Look how wet we were at the start of the year and even through about March. But then as things really started to dry out, so too did the fuels, down about 12%. And then as we look at the Northern Sierra, very similar story, coming back down towards average as well. But both are a bit above average for this time of year. But again, we're not looking at any substantial new rainfall as we go through the next several months. So that means things are just going to continue to get drier. And especially once we get towards September, October, even November, if we don't have a rainy season that really kicks in as we kind of expect it to, then we could have some of those fall fires that will have all this new plant growth that we've accumulated over the winter, spring, and early part of the summer that just dries out and is just sitting there in the windiest days of fall, in the driest days of fall, just ready to spark. So it's important to keep an eye on these fuel charts as we go deeper through the summer and into the fall. And if we don't get that rain, this will become really important. But it's just a reminder that even though we've had all that moisture early on in the year, right, things do dry out relatively quickly. But let's compare some maps now. So these maps are showing the significant wildland fire outlooks from this year versus last year. So these maps on this side of me are for 2023. These maps are from last year in 2022, and we're going to see, I'll step out of the way so we can really get a good look at these. You're going to see the difference here. Look how dry everything was across the Southwest last year and in Northern California, June 2022 on the right side there. Now look at June 2023. Look at all the green across parts of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and of course California as well. So this is a below average risk for those fires, those significant fires in Northern California and across much of the Southwest. Now, the red colors, obviously, as you might think, mean an above average risk for these significant fires. And in fact, there is a 3,000 acre fire right now in Michigan, which, as we can see on this map, has an above normal risk for this month. Let's move to July now. This is July 2022 and July 2023. And California at this point is the only one that still has that green left in the map. And it's the Sierra, really, that is still green at this point into July. This is the outlook for July. But still, compared to last year, look at how much red there was on the map last year. From the far west Texas all the way up into the eastern plains of Colorado, all the way to the Canadian border in Montana and the western part of the Dakotas. All of that was red, that above normal outlook. And of course, so too were we in Northern California for last July. But again, this year, a much different story because of all that rain and snow that we've had across the Southwest and into Northern California. It has really, really helped us out a lot, including as we work in towards August as well. Parts of the Sierra are still green with that below normal risk of a significant wildfire into August. Now, we do see some more red starting to pop up across parts of northern Nevada, but across the Southwest, it's still just that white color, an average risk year, right? But looking at last August, you can see all that red still on the map. Again, same places from West Texas up through the Great Plains, all the way to the Canadian border. And then you can also see Northern California's in the red, the Sierra were in the red, parts of the coastal range were in the red, as was much of the Pacific Northwest as well. Now, finally, September 2023, now we see a lot less of that green in California, but we still see it there for the Southern Sierra, parts of the Pacific Northwest in the red as well. And when we compare that to last year, just look how much better the map is for this year. So we kind of got lucky a little bit this year with all the rain that we've had because, you know, as we've talked about before, with the warming climate, you might not expect as much snow as what we had. You might not expect to get as much rain, but it's part of that variation, right? The thing that's hard to predict, honestly, because California has always had very variable weather, right? We've had extremely wet years to extremely dry years, even back into prehistoric times, and that just gets made worse by climate change. Now, continuing with the fire weather days increasing, I actually sat down to speak with one of the lead researchers on the project at Climate Central, Caitlin Trudeau, and here's what she had to say.
Fire weather days are the hot, dry, windy days that you see that really promote the kind of extreme and severe fire behavior that we've been seeing over the past few years.
Caitlin Trudeau and her team at Climate Central released an analysis showing something concerning: an increasing number of fire weather days over the last 50 years.
We've seen just widespread increases across the West and actually a lot of the country, some places that you probably wouldn't think of having more fire weather days. But really, it's the stories in the West. The West, there's some places that have 2 months more on average of fire weather days. And while these aren't days that you get fires, these are days that the conditions are primed to basically, if there is a fire, it could blow up into something that is much harder to fight, that will tax our resources much more than they already are, and really just kind of provide really dangerous conditions. In the Sacramento region, we've seen an increase of 2 weeks on average of fire weather days. In the San Joaquin Valley area, we're seeing an increase of about 16 days. So really, all you need is just one day where a spark is lit, you have dry lightning, and these conditions are already going to be there, and it's going to make it really difficult for us to be fighting these fires. It already has been making it very difficult.
The analysis takes into account relative humidity, temperatures, and wind speeds. And when those things come together to meet specific thresholds, it's counted as a fire weather day.
What's really happening, so it's the temperature warms. It's pulling a lot of moisture out of the landscape. Whatever moisture is already there, there's not a lot of moisture already, but the temperature gets warmer and it increases evaporation. And so that increases the dryness, it increases dry days, and that is driven by climate change in the West.
But with the extremely wet winter and cool start to the summer months, how does that change our risk this year?
You know, there are three main things that affect fire behavior. So there's weather, there's topography, and there's fuels. Our research really just focused just on the changes to weather. But what you're talking about here is a change in the fuels. So we've gotten so much moisture, so much rain over the beginning of this year, and that's going to lead to a growth in more vegetation. And when that's followed by a really dry summer, really dry fall, we're going to have more fuels there that are going to be built up, so if a fire does break out, it can be a lot more dangerous. So a lot of people think that more rain means less fires, but it can actually be the opposite.
Caitlin knows what she's talking about when it comes to wildfire. Not only did she go to school for this kind of thing, but she's also lived it.
So I grew up in Placerville, went to school at Sac State, got my graduate degree at UNR, but I've lived in California most of my life. So I've really been able to have like a front row seat to these changes, and it's really not surprising to me when we look at the data, because I feel like I've seen that, and we've seen so many of the fires over the last few years, just really anomalous conditions. You know, we had a fire that burned over the crest of the Sierras. You know, we have these things that are happening that did not happen before. And while fire is a very natural and important part of our forests, we have changed the environment in a way that is making it a lot harder to have those high frequency, low severity burns that are healthy. And instead we're having those big, massive fires that just burn everything down and are very hard to control. So I do feel like this is a topic that is very close to my heart, something I feel like you know, my friends, my family experience all the time, every year. So it's concerning. It's concerning to see these things and to know that these conditions are becoming more frequent. And to know that we don't even need a fire to break out to be impacted by these conditions, because these are the kinds of conditions that cause public safety power shutoffs. So when PG&E says, hey, it's too dangerous for, you know, we're going to turn off power for millions of people, but these are the kind of conditions that we're talking about. So we're going to see more of these days, which is going to make it harder. I mean, people losing their power, especially in the summer, people who depend on, you know, power for medical supplies, schools, businesses, it's all connected. So it's really something that impacts all of us.
Using data from 2020 and 2021, the most recent years available, and the interruption cost calculator model from Berkeley Lab, I calculated the economic impact from PG&E public safety power shutoffs. In 2020, the estimated cost was up to $2.3 billion, while the estimated 2021 cost was upwards of $3 billion. Now, these numbers aren't exact, and it depends on who was blacked out for how long, but with more fire weather days, the need for more PSPS may grow, and so too would the economic impacts.
A lot of this is being driven primarily by climate change, especially in the West, where it is getting hotter, it is getting drier, and these conditions we're being seen more frequently. If we want to change these conditions, we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. But on a smaller scale, but people locally, I would just say make sure you have defensible space around your home. Make sure you have a way to get emergency alerts, whether that's your phone or a friend or neighbor or email or whatever you use. Make sure you're talking to people in your community or checking in on your neighbors. These fires can spread so quickly, and with the winds, it can change direction in just like the snap of your fingers. So there's, to a lot of degrees, there's only a few things that I think really make that big of an impact. But I'd say, protect your homes, make sure you have a way to get alerts, be informed, check in on your neighbors and your community. And the main goal, I think, for all of us would be, reducing our dependency on fossil fuels and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, again, it doesn't mean we're gonna have fires all those days, but it means that risk is building, the risk is increasing. So, most fires are actually started by people. So, think of any different ways where fire can start, whether it's by people, whether it's naturally, we have, dry lightning in the summer. All it takes is just one thing to start a fire like this. So it is really concerning to know that risk is building and the risk is increasing. And I hope, I hope people are paying attention.